It's a new year, and thank God there's something to make me forget about the horror we've already witnessed. I took a few days off from crying in the corner of my bedroom over the state of Silent Hill to play Wrath, Aeon of Ruin, a game I haven't heard anything about in more than 4 years. I played it in early access during my run of boomer shooters in November 2019, dealing with the emotional devastation that followed the delay of Doom Eternal, and here I am in February 2024 doing a sponsored video of the official release. That's right, this video is sponsored by Fulcrum Publishing, publisher of the excellent Dread Templar and the pretty good Diluvian Ultra from last year. Also Graven. That one didn't quite work out, but I'm happy to say that Wrath left me much more satisfied and far less frustrated. Make sure you check out the Steam link in the description below. Clicking that helps track the traffic for my relationship with the publisher. Thanks. Wrath is exactly what I remembered it being in 2019, a gory, fast, Quake-style shooter with a powerful shotgun and a blade that lunges you forward, showing great potential for fun level design and secrets. Graphically, it's not the most original looking of the boomer shooters, but it is pleasant to look at. When it's not incredibly dark, you need to raise the brightness a few notches. It has some pretty snow levels, underground lava pits, and there's moments of exploring the gory insides of a giant creature. The music was done by the legendary Andrew Hulshult of Dusk, A Medieval, and Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods. This was actually an early job of his, finishing his work in 2020. The music is good, mostly eerie ambience, with a few more energetic tracks appearing in the final levels, but the vast majority of the game is scored by ambience, and there are no combat tracks used for big fights, so you don't get that fun musical energy during the action, which is unfortunate. And you absolutely have to raise the music volume in the menu and drop the sound effects because the mix is insanely low. Before I get into gameplay, I want to take a moment to praise Wrath for its save system. The game autosaves on level start, but the only way to save during a mission is to either find a one-time use shrine that refills your health, or find a portable save that can be used at any time, even during a boss fight. So you're choosing your own checkpoints, and the survival horror player in me wanted to hold on to these as long as I could for a potential sticky situation. This led to a lot of tense stretches of gameplay where I was scared to die, and I'm really glad they decided on this style of saving your progress. The weapons and enemies of Wrath scream classic 90s. You're not going to find anything that reinvents the wheel here. The bad guys you come across are the same archetypes you've come to expect in a shooter like this. And while I don't think that's a bad thing, a couple of creative enemy types would have been appreciated. But you've got all the usual suspects. Giant flying head that shoots fireballs, fast running guys that melee you, long distance harassment units which are like the most difficult and numerous enemies in the game, big charging tank that kills you quickly, exploding toxic guys that lob projectiles at you, big fat slow guys with big exploding projectiles. You've heard this song 1,000 times, but you can't help but get your ass to the dance floor. Later in the game we see cloaking spiders, which were kinda interesting, but we don't see much creativity beyond that. And the AI is quite poor. Enemies get hung up on geometry and tend to just come right at you, never moving in interesting ways to trick you and change strategy. They'll bunch up against a wall instead of finding a way around, or they'll just wait at the top of an elevator until you come up, which is pretty cheap. But when your game's AI isn't smart, you have to find ways to use it in ways that create fun challenge around their placement in the room, which is something Wrath does really well for the most part. Frequent ambushes and surprising enemy spawns keep you on your toes and force improvisation in order to survive, especially on the hard difficulty where you die quite fast. There is the occasional enemy hiding around a corner to insta-kill you, which can be infuriating, but this only happened a handful of times in the entire game. The introduction of the fire cannon guys really starts changing things because not only are they incredibly oppressive in their fire barrage, but they have a lot of HP. Fights become 10 times more dangerous when a few of them are present, and they become instant priority targets. You'll want to figure out a solid weapon combo to take them down, hitting them hard right away to put them in stun. There is a bestiary to look at drawings of the enemies, but very disappointingly there's no information about any of them. In 5 years they never came up with origins for these creatures. The weapons, like the enemies, are nothing you haven't seen before. Shotgun with an alt fire that shoots a ricocheting explosive, giving it a long range function, fully automatic fang spitter, which is essentially Quake's nail gun, Retcher, which lobs toxic goo mines, and a pistol with a triple bullet alt fire, good for a quick double tap kill on most basic enemies. And those are the weapons you have for almost the entirety of Act 1. Shortly after meeting the fire guys, you'll get the slag cannon, an explosive launcher of your own. And in early Act 2, you get the sniper rifle, and that's when Wrath really starts to come alive. For a lot of Act 1, which took me like 8 hours I guess, I was dying for some kind of rocket launcher or sniper rifle. And once I got them, I could use the quick swap mechanic to do satisfying high damage combos on floating heads and fire guys, making fights much faster and giving me a higher sense of control. Eventually you'll find the crystallizer, which sends a beam through one enemy to another, stunning them, making for great strategies during arena fights, cleaning up aerial annoyances, and easily dealing with groups of runners by stunning all of them. It's a great weapon, one that I used a lot, but I'll admit the visual effect is underwhelming. The blade isn't so useful, being way too dangerous to use on hard mode, but switching to it for zombies helps save ammo, and it was great to see the game better incorporate it into platforming and secret hunting. One of the main things I wanted to see Wrath do on full release was explore the potential of the blade as a traversal tool. I'm very happy to see they've done good. Act 2 and 3 got me thinking a lot more about how I can use it to explore and find ammo and spells. Yeah, there's a spell system. Hold the mouse wheel and pick what you need in the moment. Deflection Orb will protect you from all projectiles and send them back at the enemies, but be careful because they can walk in and hit you. Life Siphon is a vampire spell that heals you with every enemy killed, an absolutely vital spell to be using if you want to survive certain encounters and get yourself out of a near-death situation. Invincibility spell drops your health to 1 point, but makes you unkillable for a good amount of time. Great spell to have equipped and ready to activate in a panic situation. Shockwave eradicates or nearly eradicates everything within its radius. Void Grenade sucks in nearby enemies and blows them up. Confounding Affair makes all the enemies fight amongst themselves. This was my favorite spell to use. And of course, what would a Quake-inspired title be without a quad damage pickup? And there's a turret you can set down that draws enemy aggression, allowing you to escape and fight from the outside. These spells are great rewards for exploration, and as the game goes on and combat encounters become more intense, I started relying on them more and more, which helped make the overall gameplay experience more dynamic and strategic. When it all comes together, enemies, weapons, and spells, the combat in Wrath is fast and fluid, and it makes you want to continue playing fast, flying through levels as quickly as possible. And when you get into playing that way, you end up putting yourself into danger more, which makes you pull out your spells more often. That's when the magic really happens, and that's why Wrath ultimately left me feeling pretty good. Things do feel off balance in the first act though, which is a common occurrence in games that launch in early access. The more interesting spells aren't present, you go a long time without the sniper rifle, and the pistol just isn't good for long range. And the limited enemy variety starts to feel repetitive. The ammo situation is okay, but I feel like you're overloaded with shotgun shells while other weapons end up drained, even when I'm using the shotgun all the time. Later acts are better about this, but I think Act 1 could use some retuning. And just some general slimming down of the overall experience. So in Wrath, you're in a hub area that has portals to 5 levels that each have a magical rune you have to bring back and place in a circle. Once you have all 5 runes, you open another portal that leads to a boss fight. I fought the first boss, which I gotta say is pretty bad, and when it was over, I thought that was gonna be the end of the game. It was like 9 hours and I was ready to call it a day. but suddenly I was in another world and I thought, oh no, how long is this game? That's my main criticism of Wrath. While I do find the action to be consistently fun and challenging, and the level design to be well thought out and generally intuitive, not needing a map, the levels are very long and get out of control once Act 2 starts. Wrath turns into like a 20-hour campaign over 3 worlds, when really it should have been about 12 hours, cutting the number of levels to 3 per world instead of 5, and shortening each level by about 30%. Because, yeah, the action is really good, so is exploring for secrets and navigating the maps, but the simple gameplay loop can only be stretched so far when there's next to no storytelling happening. And eventually I felt like I was just going through the motions waiting for it to finally be over. I'm not sure why they made it this way. Maybe it's because it's been in development for 5 or more years and they think they have to provide a massive experience to justify the wait. Well, personally, I would have preferred them to cut the game's length in half and instead focus on improving their AI. More creative enemy behaviors, smarter enemies. It would have done a lot to keep the excitement going. This didn't need to be 20 hours. Graven had the same issue. The experience was stretched out beyond what was necessary when I think they should have prioritized other aspects. It's probably going to take you 3 days to finish Wrath, and while it is fun and I do recommend it, it just doesn't throw enough at you to shake things up. There are moments when the game teases you with great ideas. Like in Act 2, just when you're starting to get tired of how the levels are flowing, you find yourself in a place where you have to use magic to reveal hidden platforms and switches to take you to new areas. Doing things like activating energy that returns to the central zone of a level, you start to get the feeling like the levels are gonna become more ambitious, but then it turns out that's just a couple levels and then it goes back to normal. I appreciate the aesthetic change though. Level 3 is all about gore and Quake-style industrial environments. But nothing really impressive happens in terms of level design, even though, as I stated, the levels are well put together despite being too long. And the enemies introduced in the last levels are basically just bigger versions of enemies you've already seen. I guess we've entered the criticism part of this sponsored review, so let's get into it. Sometimes when I press the mouse wheel to open the spell menu, it just doesn't open. I'm not in the middle of another spell or anything, it just doesn't open, and it's because certain weapon recoveries disable the spell menu and spell activation. The most notable example is the sniper rifle, which completely disables spell selection and use while it reloads, although you can switch to another weapon no problem. And the same long reload time on the super shotgun does not disable spells, so what's happening here? It's gotta be a bug. Spell menu and spell activation should be completely independent of your other actions, or else it feels like the game is fucking up. And when I select a spell, there's this awkward delay before I can activate it, which gets me killed. You need to be able to activate it as soon as you start exiting the menu. The level geometry has a frustrating slipperiness to it, causing you to lunge forward when trying to just inch your way across a step. You can see me hesitating here because I know I'm gonna go flying just stepping down. The slipperiness also leads to a lot of accidental falls, which drops you to a previous part of the level, and you gotta go all the way back, and that really sucks. You also bounce off enemies. See here as I fly forward and just get pushed away from a zombie into a lava pit. The slipperiness of surfaces is probably my main mechanical issue with this game. You can barely even jump when you're running down stairs because you're sliding off them so much that half the time you're pressing jump you're not even making contact with the stairs, so you get nothing and it feels like the controls are unresponsive. Platforming also feels very stiff because you're unable to move forward in the air after jumping. As far as I can tell, there's no indication that you've already entered a level and found the rune, so sometimes I would enter levels I've cleared just to have to turn around and leave. I think there should be some kind of symbol by the portal showing you've already found that rune. While the guns do their job and are mostly fun to use, there's no visual feedback from the enemies except flinching. There's no blood from bullets making contact, which sometimes leaves you wondering if you're even hurting them in the case of fighting someone long range. There's no borderless windowed mode, which I don't see how someone making a game for PC for 5 years can forget to include that. It's really annoying when you're playing on a multi-monitor setup. Okay, those are my complaints. I hope this stuff can be addressed because I like Wrath. I played it till the end, the final boss fight was alright. I wouldn't mind playing it again. If it were half the length and a more focused experience, it's something I would probably repeat several times casually. I definitely recommend Wrath to my viewing audience, and if you check it out, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks again to Fulcrum Publishing for sponsoring this video and being okay with my style of doing things. I appreciate it. Please check out the link in the description below, that helps me out. Click the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next month for Arkham Asylum and Arkham City.